Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We're just waiting for some of the folks to log in that were registered for today's event. But thank you very much for attending, and we're looking forward to a great discussion with a couple of industry icons that can help SMB leaders leverage technology to grow their business. So we'll get started in just a minute or two. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stuart Cohen. I'm the president of IGI Cyber Labs. I want to thank you for joining our session today. This is an ongoing part of our SMB educational series on helping small business owners and C-level executives with the challenges they face and how do they begin to do better as it relates to cybersecurity. How do they better prepare their organizations for what the bad guys might do, and more importantly, how do they spend time leveraging technology to grow their business, because they're not in the cybersecurity business, they're in the business of running their business. So I want to thank everybody for joining today's session. A couple of housekeeping things that I'd like to cover before we get started. We want to keep this interactive. We would like you to submit questions, either put them in the question box or put them in the chat box. We will do our best to get to all of those. We had a number of them submitted in advance. I'd like to thank the people who, when they registered through GoToWebinar, put those questions in. We like to continue the conversation, so if you will participate and connect on our LinkedIn event, we would appreciate that. And that will allow you not only to talk to your peers, but to get ongoing feedback on any of the topics. This recording, we always get asked, will be recorded. We will send it out afterwards. It will be available for anybody that wants to see the rebroadcast, so you'll be aware of that as well. If we can just go to the next slide. As I said, this is part of a series. We've done a dozen of these SMB educational series, helping people with everything from getting started from a compliance standpoint to insurance, to cyber hygiene, to some initial training capability. 2 more sessions coming up in November, one around the Center for Information Security and their new CIS-18 program, moving towards compliance with Phyllis and with Tony. We have a lot of investors in small businesses that ask us, how do I get my businesses to move toward compliance? Well, the CIS-18 program is a great way to do that. Also, the NIST Stage 1 data gathering is a great way to move towards compliance as well. And we'll talk about that on November 4th. You can register on our website for that. And also, we have another session with the folks at CISA. As you know, CISA is a subset of DHS. Bradford Wilkie is going to come back and talk specifically about the new programs they've put in place to support remote and hybrid workforces. He'll be talking about that on the 18th. So as you probably have, a third to half your organization working remote, how do you support them, and what's CISA doing to help support them, are all things that we'll be talking about then. So if you get a chance, feel free to log into either one of those, send us a question in advance, participate with our LinkedIn event, or watch the rebroadcast if the timing doesn't work out well for you. But those are 2 that we have. We'll have 2 more that we'll announce in December that are already scheduled, and we will continue to provide these public service announcements to educate small businesses. With that, I would like to thank and introduce our 2 speakers today. We have 2 folks that have been in the SMB space. They've been involved in cybersecurity and MSPs for quite some time. They both have great perspectives, great advice, and just generally how an MSP can be a great partner of yours to leverage technology, once again, to grow your business. And how do they help assist in that? So we have Eric Posa, the president of Copeland Technology Solutions, and Jonathan Goldberger, who's the senior vice president of security practices and strategic sales at TPX. We're fortunate to have both of them with us today. And with that, why don't we get straight into, one of the first questions that got asked, which was specifically about how do I find the right MSP? It's a great first question to get asked. And Eric, I think you probably have some ideas about how people can do this. So why don't we start with you, and then Jonathan can comment from there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stuart. So obviously finding anything on the internet is as easy as doing a Google search. However, the important piece of this question is finding the right MSP. Any organization can provide monitoring and servers and PCs and break fix help desk support. But there's some key things that you can leverage from a good MSP that can truly enhance your business. The most important thing I would start off asking anybody who's proposing to you or you're interviewing through the vendor evaluation processes, how are they going to educate you on some application or solution and how it's going to improve your business in some way? If they can't talk to you about increased revenues or better quality of your product or specific things like risk mitigation, protection, and they're just talking about computers and networks and things like that, they may help you, but they're not going to help you elevate your company to a better performing organization. You should also have an account manager that can take tech language, geeky nerd language, and explain those in terms that you can understand and how they work, so that you can make a great decision for your group, a strategic decision to improve the performance of your organization. So you can ask questions like, do I have an account manager? Do I have a specific person to go to? Am I going to talk with them? How often? Are they only going to call us when they want to sell us something new, or are they truly going to be involved with our long-term strategy for our organization? Many times I speak about having a seat at the grown-ups table. Are you going to give this IT resource a seat at the grown-ups table to talk with your C-level suite and understand what your long-term goals are? And then lastly, I would definitely ask about how you're training this main contact in proper business business actions. Like, are you getting any sort of leadership training, finance training? Are they reading P&Ls? Do they know how to read financial statements? Those types of things are important for your account manager to know, because they need to recommend something, and they can't recommend technology without understanding the business challenges. So a lot of companies out there can sell you equipment and put in networks and things like that, but are they truly going to elevate your organization and give you good strategic guidance?
Yeah, Eric, those are all great points. The right MSP is more important than the MSP, which is part of what you're saying, and that's absolutely right. Yeah, I always think about managed services. We use managed services every day in our lives. For some of us, it's having somebody do our lawn care. For others, it's watching our child, or then it might even be something like having someone take care of an animal. But we're using managed services in everything we do. And what we all know from that experience is the right managed service provider is the difference between happiness and a good outcome and misery. I think when you talk about the right MSP, it's so important that it's an organization that provides the outcome you seek, and you need to know what that is. Is the outcome that I seek tied to enabling my team to work more on the business of my business, or is the outcome to achieve a level of IT and security aptitude and protection? Is it to have defensibility for a specific regulatory requirement, or a business partner requirement, or board leadership requirement? But understanding what that outcome is you seek, and then finding the right MSP that can easily within their sweet spot, easily achieve that and can show you how they've achieved that outcome with others. That's, I think, one of the most important things here. It's easy to say that you can do something, much more difficult to prove and show it through the experience of others. Whenever I am going to use any service, watch my child as an example, I ask for those references. I call those references because this is my child. I'm not going to just hand that over to anyone that I've met at the McDonald's parking lot. No, it's someone that I want, that I can trust. And trust is tied directly in there. So how do you find them? Talk to your peers. Ask from others of if they can recommend someone that has enabled them to achieve that outcome they desired. The other piece is really knowing you. And if you don't know what you ultimately want, it's going to be really difficult to achieve that outcome. Often case, when we work with customers, one of the things we do right in the beginning is to say, what does success look like 12 months from now? And how does that success of 12 months from now differ from the success of 6 months from now, 3 months from now, 1 month from now? Understanding what those, well, we're in football season, so I can throw that out there. Understanding what those first downs are, what those means of success is so important, so that as a managed service provider, I can make sure I'm enabling that to occur. When you have that not understood, if my customer doesn't know what success looks like in a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, it's very difficult for me to make sure that they achieve that outcome. And then the one last thing I want to say on this is that what a managed service provider does is also incredibly important. If your objective with your managed service provider is to enable your people to be able to do the business of your business, great. You want to make sure that the IT activity that you're moving off, that they do today, is part of the managed services daily activity, the standard repeatable activity that they do. If what you're hoping to get is to improve that security level, well, to achieve security, it's not just tools. That's one of the truths in the security ecosystem. Tools only do so much. Humans come into play, and so it takes time and energy from your resources to achieve that outcome in security. So making sure that it's not just managing a tool, but what are they doing with that tool? And am I going to end up with a bunch of alerts and follow-up that I've got to do to achieve that outcome? Ultimately, the right managed service provider achieves the outcomes you've defined, and they enable your people to focus on the business of your business.
No, those are great points. Those are terrific points.
Stuart, can I add? Stuart, do you mind if I add one thing? Jonathan, you had such great points. You kind of sparked my interest when you talked about finding that and how do you evaluate that service provider. It's critical you don't hand this off to somebody to do the vetting up front who has a role in the organization of office manager, or somebody that doesn't understand your P&L and what your long-term strategy is. You need to get involved. It sounds like it's a lot of work, but the worst thing, the most work comes from picking the wrong vendor. That could be catastrophic. So you need to get involved, ask business questions. If they can't talk to you about what they can bring to the table to affect your long-term strategy, or they don't even care about it, and they're just talking about themselves, you know you don't have the right vendor in front of you.
To that point, for an organization, a lot of these small businesses, they have desktop support, and that's kind of what they've had it for a while. They're comfortable with it, and as they start to wade into a little bit about cybersecurity with all the things they've heard, all the issues, all the stuff in the press, how do you work with them to provide a few simple steps that can get them kind of on the way to getting started, on the way they can tell their investors they're moving in the right direction, they can tell their boards or their employees, here's what we're doing to take steps forward with all the things that are in the press. You know, maybe that would be worth just spending a moment on, and then we'll go to the next question that was submitted.
Sure.
The attorney, I think, is important.
That's Eric. I'll hand to you in a sec. I'm going to just, one of the things that I think we forget is how important with a managed service provider it is that they have an expertise. You know, when we go to doctors, we don't tell the doctor what we need. We look for the doctor to prescribe a solution to the pain I'm feeling. And that's the same thing with your managed services provider. You know, you want to partner with someone where you're going to them with the pain. You've identified this is the outcome I need, this is the pain I'm feeling. And you want a managed service provider who's prescribing that solution. You know, Eric's organization, my organization, we've been doing this for a long time. We've seen the failures, we know the gotchas, we understand the level of achievement necessary to get to that outcome. And so by working with organizations like ours, we're able to prescribe the solution versus just saying, what product? You want me to manage it? Here's the cost. Eric, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great points. Yeah, Stuart, to your question, you know, looking, you know, it's looking at where do you start is a very difficult question. In your mind, you don't know what that looks like. You don't know what that costs. And sometimes you can be just overwhelmed and feel kind of helpless where you start. An MSP or a good cyber partner will always be able to kind of put this whole thing in perspective. And the most important first step is creating a plan with dates attached to that plan. If something happens and someone comes in and does an audit or something's going on and there is no plan, they think you don't care about cybersecurity. They don't think that you care about protecting their information. If you have a plan in place and you have these milestones and you stick to that plan, you don't have to drop 50 grand or 100 grand right out of the gates. It's something over time that you can add layers of protection that are the most valuable to you based on your organization, and slowly over 12 months get to a specific spot. Then you build another layer on top of that, and then you address something that's new that just came into the market. So you have to have somewhere to start. Putting a plan in place with accountable dates is the most important thing to show that you're paying attention to this.
Oh, those are great points. Why don't we move to the next question that got submitted in advance? This one may trigger some other questions that come in through the chat box or through the question box. But you know, how do I increase top line revenue, and how can an MSP help me increase my top line revenue? Jonathan, you might want to take a couple of thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. And you know, I did say earlier, you know, really appreciate this opportunity because for a lot of folks, they're running at 1,000 miles an hour. They're working on their business and all the challenges associated with doing the business that you do. And so I know it takes time, and unfortunately, it takes time away from some other things to take this time to learn about this. So thank you for doing that. Top line revenues is really what, for most of us, we're about. We're in the business, and in that business, you got to make money. Unfortunately, you can't run red forever. And so to make money, you've got to make sure you're bringing more than you're sending out. IT is a cost. Now, it's an enablement cost. It's about enabling an organization to achieve their revenue objectives, achieve automation and efficiency, achieve the customer experience being of top quality, but it is still a cost. And so one of the important things you do is making sure your IT organization doesn't have costs that are running rampant without the control tied to it, and making sure you're being as efficient as possible with those costs. One of the most important, expensive things nowadays is us, you and I, humans. And the cost of people, especially in IT, just continues to go up. So you can really improve your margins and increase the top line revenues by ensuring that your IT costs are protected, but yet you're having that automation and efficiency. You're making sure that the customer experience is welcoming new opportunity. You know, Starbucks, many of us, we take part in Starbucks. Starbucks, it originated as being this cafe where you would go, you sit, you have a drink, you chat with your friends. And from a revenue manner, the way that the customer consumes, the way the customer comes into the organization to that coffee shop is walk up. Well, then they said, hey, let's do the drive-through because that's how we like to consume. We like to consume through a drive-through, and they enabled that as another revenue stream. And then they moved on into online ordering. Let's make it where that order can be made and people don't have to wait in line. They just pick up their drink and they go. They pick up their eggs and they go. Doing it where there's another means to improve the user experience. IT can enable that, whether it's through that a web app, whether it's through efficient customer support, whether it's through having automated chat. There's means to improve your top line revenues by making it easier for your users to consume and managing that IT spend. Those two things are very important. A managed service provider can take those standard repeatable activities, those things that need to be done every single day, week, month, quarter, year associated with IT, and operationalizing that so that it's done at great performance level, consistent and stable, enables your IT staff to focus on those other means of bringing in revenue, those other means of enabling the consumption by your customers instead of doing the menial everyday tasks of those operational activities. A great example is patching. We all have workstations. For many of us, we have folks that are working in different environments, whether it's in the office or remote. And you need to have a consistent and repeatable manner to patch those systems. You gotta make sure it's happening consistently. And it's gotta be doing it in a manner where you ensure a system that isn't patched is not allowed to continue to do business, but instead is caught and governed and updated. Patching is something that can be done by a managed service provider. They are working on that continuously. They provide the proper reporting. They chase those that aren't. And ultimately, by operationalizing that, you make yourself more secure because not having a system patch opens those vulnerabilities. Then the IT team can focus on rolling out those new services, rolling out whether those new services are automated capabilities for the business, customer connections into the business, or means of bringing in revenue. Make sense?
Absolutely. Eric, any thoughts on that?
No, I think he did a great job. Thanks, John.
So the next question, this has been something that from the very beginning, our advisory council asked us to put together these public service announcements, educational webinars to really talk about three things, right? How do we help small businesses make their information more confidential? How do we improve the integrity of their systems? And the third one, if something were to happen, how do we help them from a business continuity standpoint get back on track? And the idea of how do I increase my business efficiency by having an MSP, I think leads to all three of those areas. And Eric, maybe you could comment a little bit about how an MSP can help go about defining and then delivering some of those points.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is one of my favorite areas just because we are a small business and we are able to be agile and very fast paced because of the way in which we use our own technology. So when we talk about things like this, I hear the term, hey, how can we be more efficient? But no one really breaks that down into examples or what does that really mean? For us, people is our greatest expense, right? It's 80% of our cost. So being able to do more with the same or less people is a key way in which we drive margin. Can we take on more customers with who we got? Can we take on larger customers with who we have? Is there a way that we can implement things faster with what we have today or change things? Using technology to make a process quicker, improve your operational velocity is one of the most cost-effective ways to do so. An example of that would be like leveraging an application like Microsoft Teams 365 or Slack. right? Being able to email for things once in a while is great. If your organization can immediately communicate with each other, see that someone's seeing something and know someone's responding, it immediately takes out all of the back and forth of email. So-and-so didn't respond in time. Now they're responding to the oldest email that they have. This is real live communication with your team, and it's immediate, and you know there's a connection there. Also, how many times do you hear about, oh, the sales team, oh, they're promising everything, we never know what they're doing, then it gets handed off to the implementation team, they don't have a clue, and then operationally we don't know how to support them because we don't know what was promised. There's so much information being shared during that sales process, onboarding process. It all needs to be in one place. So for us, for example, when we have a sales process, everything's in one spot. In our in Teams for us in 365, we all work together on that. We share notes, and all that stuff just gets picked up and plopped into the onboarding. Now onboarding knows everything that we talked about up until that point, and they add their piece. And then on the back end, any projects need to happen, we've got all the information for those in one spot. So there's no time wasted in repeated meetings or looking for information, and you can do more with less or do more with the same. You can onboard 2 customers at a time now because you're much more efficient, because you've got meeting structure. Everybody can see where we stand with all of these documents and these tasks, and then it just moves off into the next path. So that's truly leveraging technology to be more efficient. We can do more with what we got.
Yeah, Eric, you said it so well. I think as we mature our businesses, our ability to orchestrate and automate can be the difference between blowing out a year and just making that year. And all of us, especially with the way systems work now, I mean, we've got great computing power. There's great AI that has been performed, and what you're trying to do in your business, likely others are trying to do as well. You know, we like to think that we're all snowflakes and we've got this very unique business and we're solving very unique challenges, but the reality is that these come up again and again. We're not trying to put somebody, a community on Mars yet. We're really just trying to automate and bring in more leads, you know, be more efficient in how we communicate to our customers. And so I've always said that organizations need a chief automation officer. They need someone who's thinking every single day, every single second, how do I orchestrate and automate this business? Because it's through that orchestration and that automation that you really get the efficiencies and better margins, better customer experiences. If you really want to think of this from real world experience standpoint, think of how the airlines have changed how they do what they do. As in, if you go back 20 years ago, you know, airlines, you get a ticket, and yeah, you might go online to get that ticket. You might get an email confirming that ticket. But now we get texts, we don't have to call a customer service rep. You can actually have it where you interact with a customer service rep solely through text, through social media. There's the app tells you when you land, where your next gate is, if the rebooking is done in an automated manner, and all that gives a better experience for the passenger, the customer, as well as makes them more efficient in handling those. So that's a great real world experience. Eric, you're absolutely right. That efficiency is so important.
Yeah, we very often show our customer base what we are doing to show them examples. That's one other way you can you know, gauge your existing MSP or a vendor that you're evaluating is show me how you do business. And if they're not leveraging technology to do more with less, how are they going to educate you on how to do that and show you the way, right? So I love talking about this piece because our team's always looking for that. You know, how can we add a new type of communication in this spot to improve our performance, drive your product quality upwards by using technology in some way? Someone has to help guide you through that. And that's where your account manager, your MSP come into play. They listen to the business challenges, We got to get better at this. We'd really like to do that. Blue sky for us. Hey, it'd be great if we can just reach everybody like this. What's out there? That MSP's responsibility is to show you the way on how to do that.
You know, one of the things that Alan Alford, who, you know, used to be with NTT, now he's with TrustMap. You know, he's been with very large organizations, been with very, you know, a small organization. Now, you know, he talked about, you know, if you're a small business owner or C-level executive, you ought to start with the 3 legs of the stool, as he talked about it. He talked about, you know, do a vulnerability management scan, find out what you have, what's exploitable, figure out how to implement multi-factor authentication to get started, and then begin to do some cyber education with your employees and have your MSP do it. I thought that was a great analogy for him to make on kind of how he thought people should get started. You know, I'm curious, this question about, you know, how do I protect against cyber threats on my SMB budget? You know, maybe you guys have some perspective about, once again, how do they reach out to an MSP? How do they reach out to an MSP, and what are some of the questions they should ask to make sure they can do it and have a positive impact?
Yeah, this is really difficult for SMBs because they don't have the expertise, they don't have the capital, the cash to just throw at every security threat that exists in the landscape. They don't likely have the skill set to implement, maintain, and get the outcome desired from the security products. So it's really hard. The easiest thing is to do nothing. But we all know that doesn't help at all, and frankly just positions us for the failure. We try to make it easy. And you know, one of those things, especially with security, is you gotta know which threats are real for you. And what I call that is, what are my realistic risks? You know, when I cross the street, the risk is I get run over. So I know the way that the controls I can put in place is look left and right. Don't necessarily run. Things that I can do to reduce my risk associated with getting hit when I cross the street. Wearing a helmet reduces a risk, but it doesn't necessarily reduce the risk of me getting hit crossing the street. So it's important to know, what are my realistic risks? And in security, for SMBs, your biggest risk, without question, is ransomware. It's ransomware because of 3 reasons. Money, money, money. It's money. These folks are making so much money. The federal government believes that in the first 6 months of this year, ransoms paid were over $590 million. $590 million in 6 months paid in ransom. These are modern era pirates. And so when you have something that is highly successful, because people are so vulnerable, people invite the malware in. When you have it where they can make tons of cash, and you have it where it's really difficult to hold people accountable, it's going to continue. That is the threat that every single organization who's plugged into the internet absolutely needs to worry about right now as the number one. And so then you go, all right, as a small business, how do I focus on that? My biggest risk, which is really that. Well, it really comes down to, what are the vectors of attack? The vectors of attack, first, remote services, like remotely connecting into the network. The second is phishing. Those 2 vectors accounted for 81% of the attacks last year. 81. The third was a web application. When you add the web application to it, 98% are through those 3 vectors. If you don't have a web application, which is a web people log into on the application, or an application, if you just have those remote services and those phishing, that's where you need to focus. And so the reason I bring this up is security is hard. It's hard because there's 1,000 different threats out there. The vendor landscape in security is enormous. And for most small businesses, they just don't have the expertise to know that that threat that product eliminates is not my most important threat. They don't have the expertise or the trust with someone who can filter it for them. And that's what you need. You need someone you can trust who's going to say, what's my focus? What do I really need to worry about? And then what are the controls I can put in place to remediate it? Now, one last thing I want to add on this, and then Eric, I'm gonna hand it off to you here, is that we've got to realize that you and I, the users of an organization, we are just inviting malware into the environment. We are holding the door open for the attackers to let them come in. Whether we're doing that from bad passwords that we don't change, whether we're doing that because we don't utilize multi-factor authentication, whether we're doing that because we're enabling all these services to be visible on the internet, which consider them just doors into the network, or we're doing that by clicking on an email that says, your president has a message for you. Click here. Or better yet, your Instagram account has had some questionable activity. Click here to validate. These type of things are all inviting the malware in. And so I urge you, if there's one thing for you to do, one thing right away, it's train your employees every month. Train them every month on security. Do it in small bite-sized pieces. Send the phishing exercises that can to your users 2 or 3 a month, not just one. Have it go randomly so that people are applying, they're using their gray matter, applying it and learning not to click. That continuous security awareness training means we don't hold the door open for the attackers, but instead they walk by your company to another vulnerable one. Eric?
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I mean, and there's that protection on the front end to make sure that they're not getting in through the easiest means necessary. But as we've seen in the past, you know, Equifax, Target, Home Depot, you know, they're going to get in, right? So how do I reduce that risk or mitigate that risk? And there's lots of things you can do on the scanning side, checking for vulnerabilities and things like that. To your point about ransomware being the biggest threat right now, you need to protect against ransomware. And just protecting on the front end is only half the battle. You also have to be prepared if it does happen. So a good MSP will take you through a business impact analysis, go through each one of your applications and say, if this were to go away today, how long until it impacts your business negatively before that comes online? What time frame is that? Your return recovery time objective, how long that you can be without that before it becomes prohibitive, and then your recovery point objective. How far back in time, if your data goes back and we restore that, are you having some serious challenges? So if you go back to last night's backup, is that okay? What if you went back to last Friday's backup? Finding those specific points and then creating a requirement for what your backup needs to be is what an MSP should be doing for you. So they take you through that exercise, they determine what the requirements are. Our business needs to be back online within 2 days minimum, or that's the maximum. We'd like to be sooner, and we can't lose any more than 1 hour's worth of data. You have to put together a plan for that. And what your MSP should be talking to you about is the 3-to-1 backup. Having 3 copies of your data, no question. Disk space is cheap. There is no excuse for not having multiple copies of your data. Number 2, having them on 2 different media. So it can be another server, it can be cloud, it can be USB drive, it can be a NAS unit, it can be anything. It has to be on 2 separate ones because things fail. Do not use DVDs and CD-ROMs. I don't even know if those are a thing anymore, but those fail. People think they're forever, they're not. And then lastly, you have to have one of those off-site. Okay, using the cloud is a great way, but it has to be done in the correct way, because attackers will attack your backups even if they're in the cloud. So you need to make sure that cloud provider has ransomware protection. They are taking a copy of your data, putting it somewhere else that can only be seen by that provider. Nobody else can get to that. Even if they go in and clean house on all your backups, you have this ransomware copy that you can get back online. that it's critical to have that today. There's no excuse for not having that. And it's not too much money. It's not today, online cloud disk space is not that much money. Having an MSP to take you through that process, determine those requirements, and then lay out the plan for that is what you need to protect if something does happen.
And Eric, I'm glad you brought that up. What people don't realize is when ransomware happens, there's not a warning. It's not like, your computers start to run a little bit slowly, or kind of like with your car engine where it won't start sometimes and then it just goes, and so something's going on. It's just you wake up one morning, you go in, and usually it's not that. It's Saturday at 2 a.m. because the attackers know this. Nobody's really there. It executes. And at that moment, your options are: one, pay the ransom. And the average price for ransom in 2020 was $170,000. It's significantly more now. And you don't want to negotiate with ransomware attackers. You just, that's just not a great place to be. Because even if you get the key, you don't know whether it's fully going to decrypt. And if it does fully decrypt, you don't know if it's going to be clean, where you've cleaned the environment and it's not going to happen again. And let's be honest, if I'm a criminal and I know that I can get something from someone, what's the next thing I'm going to do after I get something from someone? Try it again. I got a vulnerable person, let me try it again. And so you don't know. So you can pay, you can restore, which is the best scenario. You wipe the machines, you restore from a known good, and you get running as fast as possible. You don't worry about negotiation. But if you don't have a good backup, if you're not working with a good provider, if you can't ensure that that backup is protected from having the malware on it itself, you only have one more option. And that last option is wipe and start over. And you know your business. How many of your customers are going to wait around while you wipe and start over? How much time do you have available from a resource standpoint with the skill set to wipe everything and restart and rebuild? That's why so many small businesses who have an actual breach go out of business in 6 months, because they don't have that capital, they don't have the people, they don't have the number of customers that patiently will wait while they recover. Back up, Eric. Amen, brother. That's it.
And it's not the responsibility of your IT person or your office manager to make sure that's working. It's the leadership's responsibility. I know a lot of times I hear like, oh, how do I know if it's running? Our guy's checking the log. There are so many ways to do a test. Just create a file, toss it on the public drive, wait a couple days, delete the file, wait a couple days, say, hey, I deleted a file by accident, restore this for me, please. If they can't deliver that quickly, there's a big problem going on. Secondly, is they should be able to provide a document of an actual legitimate test that we failed over successfully. And I would recommend doing that minimum once a year, twice a year if you've got high availability needs. Test it out. It's your responsibility as the leadership to make sure that this is happening, because it affects the company, and the company's your responsibility.
Great perspectives across the board. Couple of things. I want to ask the next question, but before we do that, on all of these webinars, we always ask a couple of poll questions to get a feel for the audience and some of the issues they're facing. We have one specifically around the use of an MSP. So we're going to put that poll question up now. There it is in front of you. And if at the same time, while they're answering the question, if you can talk a little bit about the ROI, and how do you address the question from a small business owner that says, I'm really interested in starting down the path with an MSP, but how do I calculate the ROI of doing this? Or is this just a cost of doing business that I need to understand? So if while people are responding, if you could just provide your insights on that, we'll take this poll down in just a couple of seconds.
Sure. So, ROI is one of these holy grails that exist in the IT and information security vendor landscape. The question always asked by good business people is, well, what's the ROI of this that I'm going to spend? And it's ROI. We'd love to believe in the macro, but it's really in the micro. It's really about what is the outcome I desired, what is my cost to achieve that outcome today, and if I can achieve it today, what's that gap that's enabling it? Like if I'm not able to achieve it today with my people and my tools I have, well, your ROI is already in the favor of the managed service because you're not able to achieve it now. But ultimately, you want to look at what that outcome is. A great example, managed endpoints. You know, I've got a bunch of endpoints, laptops that exist, or servers that exist, and workstations that exist on my network. And to manage them, I got to make sure they're patched. I got to make sure they have AV. I got to make sure they have, you know, endpoint protection and that they are maintained over time. I need to make sure that they're getting all the patches for Chrome and for the operating system. So I need to maintain that and operationalize it. What's your cost of doing that today? Well, I've got 3 people, Jimmy, Sarah, and Diane, who are responsible for this. And what tools do you use? Well, I've got these tools that I'm using for managing that environment. And then what's the amount of time it takes to do that every month? Is Jimmy, Diane, and Sarah doing full time, or is it a sliver of their time? And you can start to build out a semblance of what your costs are. But ultimately, there's also that cost of managing it over time. As in, with managed services, you can make it where it's ratable over the lifetime of the contract, which makes it much easier from a software licensing standpoint. From a cost to the business standpoint, I'm paying a monthly fee versus a lump sum fee. But ultimately, a good managed service provider can help identify and help you understand what costs are you saving by using the managed service provider to achieve this outcome. And it's not just the cost, it's also the ability to achieve that outcome. If you're not patching today in a consistent, standard manner with good results, well, then the cost you're doing today is completely wasted because you're not achieving that outcome. So ROI is equally the cost savings, but also the outcome achieved. And you need to look at it from the micro.
Yeah, absolutely. The outcome is where we start with everything, that business result, the desired business result. I agree with you, Jonathan. You can't go into this and say, I'm going to save 20% of my cost by going with this MSP versus another. And any MSP that says we'll be able to do that for you, I would dig deeper into that. I would ask lots of questions. The base level of services an MSP provides is pretty straightforward, pretty much across the board. You're gonna pay per device per month, per server per month, things like that. Make sure you're checking all the boxes off. But if they can't take a desired business result that you want as an organization and help you get there, that's where that additional return on investment, that additional value is. So it's something that you're not gonna be able to package up in totality. To your point, Jonathan, it's at that micro level, okay? Vet your MSP up front, make sure they can handle business questions. They are a business company that does technology, not a technology company in business, okay? They need to be run efficiently, run well, and have great people. Once you get that part done, then individual results you can start tracking. Listen, we've got this issue. We've got 17 proposals out the door right now. We can't handle this work. How are you going to help us do that? And then you can really put numbers on there, metrics out there, and have conversations how you can leverage that tech to achieve that 17 proposal closing coming through the door. So the other thing I'm going to say on that is you can't always bank on the provider either. I know I keep saying it a lot today and people probably don't like it, but it's partly your responsibility too. You need to be able to look at your business and see where your gaps are and ask that tech company, help me find answers to this gap, we want to get to here. I don't know how to do it in this situation. Help guide me through. So you got to be in on those account reviews. You got to be talking about the long-term strategy. Hey, we want to open up 3 offices next year. If the tech company is finding out 1 week before you're opening your first office that you're opening that office, I guarantee failure. So it is a partnership, and you are working together to get the maximized value with your MSP. But when you look at all the partners you have available to your company, your MSP is one of the top 3 that can help you grow your business.
You know, we just got a question in that I think is worth getting to while we only have 10 minutes left. You know, it gets back to, I think, the doctor-patient relationship that you guys alluded to earlier. And the question was, you know, how do you handle the roadblocks you might get from a user when you want to implement new technology for them to use? And maybe we can talk about, you know, how do you go about that? And better yet, hopefully, and I assume you're going to talk about how it's driven by their wants and needs. So you don't implement new technology without being tied to their wants and needs. But I'd like your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. It's your consultant or your MSP's responsibility to ask all the questions to define the desired result. Like Jonathan said, the outcome. What is the outcome? Secondly, it's their job to get champions or leadership to help facilitate that change. If a user is getting in the way of implementing some sort of application or technology that's going to improve the business, there's a conversation that needs to happen. Either the MSP is not conveying that message properly, or that person is doing it intentionally and they need to be removed from the situation. So there's always going to be roadblocks. We do ask that question, are there any competing priorities when we go through our assessments? If there are, we talk about them. Bring them, get that person involved in that conversation to understand the challenges that they see. It may be a gotcha moment. They may see something that we don't. So I get that person involved.
Yeah, Eric, that's a great point about it's a lot easier to get behavioral change, which is what we're really talking about, where users' behaviors change, whether it's in, you know, how they achieve something today, clicking here, running this program or doing this process, to doing it differently or having a new process or a new program. It's behavioral change. Majority of people don't like change. Like, that's just reality. And so they've learned a behavior and you're trying to change that. And so doing that in a vacuum is probably the worst thing you can do from a user perspective, you know, enabling that change. If you do it isolated from the users, but when you bring the users into it, that's so valuable. So I love that point, Eric, and completely agree. The other thing I would recognize here is that when you're talking about users, and this happens in security all the time, you know, security is about protecting, you know, let me put some controls around that data or that process or that function to inhibit malicious users from accessing it. Well, what do these controls do? It also makes it a little bit more effort for those users that are verified to access it. And a great example of this is two-factor auth or multi-factor auth. I mean, I think all of us probably have at least one multi-factor authentication we're using. Whether it's when we try to do something with our credit card or our bank and they text us the number, or maybe it's tied to using biometrics, or maybe it's tied to when you check in or call your mobile service provider and they ask you for that passphrase on top of your password, or what city were you born at, some additional level of authentication. And that, for a lot of people, is really, I have to do this piece of it. But it's there for a reason. And it's walking the users through, this is why you do it. And it really, whenever you're doing business change from a user perspective, understand that humans don't change easy, but if you walk them to the well, they'll be willing to drink, as long as they have the picture, the understand why, how, what. That makes that easier change, and then provide the training. Don't jam it in. Don't make it where you know 2 days prior you're doing the training, but just enable them to be stakeholders through the change, because it's human behaviors we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and Jonathan, the communication piece is huge. One of our guys brought up one time, and I love this example. I'm a big DC and Marvel fan. I love all that stuff. Dark Knight Rises. There's a spot in that movie where the Joker says, you know, I can do the most chaotic thing, but as long as it's all part of a plan, everybody is okay. If they know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to affect them, what's the risk here, what could happen, and how we're going to mitigate that. All of a sudden, everyone starts to be like, okay, whew, this change may not be so bad because it's all part of a plan.
Yeah, that's well said. To that point, one of the hardest skills to find in people, just employees, are those comfortable with ambiguity. Those that can handle ambiguity easily. Say it another way is, it's really difficult to find employees that are comfortable with change and dynamic environments and surprises. So, like you said, Eric, if you give a plan and you present that, yeah, you can get people on board. Anyone who's an engineer, they want 360 degrees of data. If you don't give them 360 degrees of data, they're going to just have question after question after question after question, which inhibits adoption. So you got it.
So we've got 4 minutes. We have one more poll question that I'd like to put up so people can respond to that. And then why don't you each provide, just some closing points. If you're an MSP, when should you come, right? If you're an SMB, when should you come to an MSP? What should you look for? How do you go about that? Let's begin to, maybe talk through a little bit about, how do you coach and guide somebody that's looking for local assistance, that's looking for help and support.
Jonathan, you want to go or do you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say, especially with what we've experienced over the past 18, 19 months, okay, it's more important now than ever to have some sort of strategic technology person as part of your team, okay? You're getting off the ground, your 5 to 10 person shop, having your person, your guy or gal that helps you with technology, that's okay. Once you start getting into that 10 plus users or specific amounts of revenue, you're going to start to need a team of people, someone to do break fix, someone to have the conversations, someone to talk backup. And at that point, it becomes cost prohibitive to have one person for each one of these specialties. You need to have a team approach. I would continuously, if I'm a business owner getting off the ground, I would be continuously poking out there and just having conversations with people as your company grows. If you're someone who's doing 10 plus people in your office, you should be having a conversation because the tools are out there. Jonathan mentioned AI, ways to protect things. They may sound like they're really expensive and they're completely out of control, but an MSP can actually help you understand what it means to your business and the impact it can make. So I wouldn't wait at all.
Yeah, and Eric, thanks. I agree with you. The focus on your business. I'm not sure what you do, but you're in that business because you're an expert, because you're good at it, because you make your customers successful. And focus on that. As soon as you're unable to do that, as in your time is distracted from your business to do something in IT or security, utilize managed services providers. Utilize an MSP who can help take that work, operationalize that work, so that you can focus on doing what you do great. And the right time is always, because there's always things that are hygiene based in security and IT that have to occur in modern business. And the right MSP, well, your peers can help you with that. Your partners can help you with that. And the right cost, well, it's tied directly to your outcomes. You with a common theme, you don't necessarily want to get the cheapest burger in the joint in the city. And I'm sure I can get a burger that cost me 59 cents somewhere. It might be old meat. It might be something that's an old burger that's been microwaved. But I'd rather get a burger that tastes good, fills me up, and I'm thrilled about the experience. And so in that scenario, it's worth paying what fits into my budget. Know your budget, know your outcome, and work within your network of partners and peers to pull in and find that right managed service provider.
Hey, Guys, thank you so much. We are a firm believer that, if we can educate all of the small business owners around the country to get started and they can find an MSP to deliver that assistance to them, that is the best scenario for everyone involved. It's a highly underserved market. We're doing our best to educate them and train them. I want to remind everybody, if you're worried about compliance or you're trying to figure out how to get started on compliance, we have the session on CIS 18 coming up. If you're a hybrid workforce, which you probably are, we have the session with CISA coming up later in November. Make sure you sign up for those, participate in our LinkedIn environment, participate in our LinkedIn events, and we'll make sure to get back to you. If either one of you need to get a hold of Jonathan or Eric, please hit up there's their contact information for them. Or if you need anything from us, please contact us and we'll make sure that we get the information out to them. So with that, I really want to thank you two for your time. I really appreciate your insights and your perspective. And we look forward to the next session coming up on the 4th in our SMB educational webinar series. Thank you both.
Absolutely. That was fun.
Thank you, everybody.